Welcome to the Smart Connector, the podcast that helps entrepreneurs be the leader their ideal people love. Build your influence, wealth and success, attract others for all the right reasons, and become a smart connector, the architect of your amazing business and life. I met Michael Garvey when I was on the board of Bucks Business First, a fantastic organisation dedicated to helping entrepreneurs thrive in the county of Buckinghamshire. We shared a common interest in property as he's also the leading commercial agent in the Thames Valley. He's a lovely, low-key guy who everyone warms to, and as chairman of BBF is doing some fantastic work to ensure businesses in Buckinghamshire grow and prosper. Enjoy our telephone interview. I'm delighted today to welcome Michael Garvey to the Smart Connector podcast. And Michael is a partner of Chandler, Garvey, a market-leading firm of commercial property consultants in the Greater Thames Valley region, with a network of 5 offices in Buckinghamshire and Berkshire. Michael's also chairman of Bucks Business First, a business organisation in Buckinghamshire with more than 11,000 members, which dedicates itself to empowering economic prosperity in the entrepreneurial heart of Britain. He's also a director and vice chairman of the Buckinghamshire Local Enterprise Partnership with specific responsibility for infrastructure, and a member of the Buckinghamshire Local Transport Board. He's board member of Bucks Advantage, a delivery mechanism for the Local Enterprise Partnership, and a high-profile speaker at many business events, including the House of Commons and the European Parliament in Brussels. So, Michael, welcome.
Jane, hello, how are you?
I'm fine. It's so great to have you on here.
Pleasure to be here.
Really delighted. So, Michael, I'd love to talk about 2 things in this interview. So, first of all, can you tell our listeners about Bucks Business First, because I'd like to hear about that first, and then we'll move on to talking about your role at Chandler Garvey in the commercial property landscape in and around Buckinghamshire. So first of all, tell us about Bucks Business First. What inspired you to take up the role as chairman?
So this journey starts about 7 years ago. So when the election took place in 2010 and the coalition government came to power, they abolished the regional development agencies. That was the route for a lot of public money coming into the regions. And so, for example, at that time, the CEDA, South East England Development Agency, was bringing a lot of money into places like Kent, but wasn't really bringing it into places like Buckinghamshire. And when those regional development agencies were abolished, local enterprise partnerships were created. And those weren't initially considered to be having to have ubiquitous coverage across the England and Wales region. But it very quickly became apparent that everybody wanted one, because that was going to be the opportunity to speak with government, to bring economic development money into that local enterprise partnership area. Yes. But Buckinghamshire was left in white space, so wasn't initially allocated as a local enterprise partnership or a LEP. And so I was one of 10 business people that came together and thought, well, we're going to be disadvantaged by this. And so in the entrepreneurial heart of Britain, as you've rightly described it, what was the business approach to this? Well, we're going to create our own economic development vehicle. And that's how Buckinghamshire Business First was developed by 10 business people who came together, had a conversation around the need for a self-support mechanism for businesses in the county. And we created that organisation, which was partly to encourage, to help, to promote business activity within the county, a very successful county, but one with lots of small businesses, and smaller businesses weren't having lots of conversations with themselves at that time, but also really to push for a local enterprise partnership for Buckinghamshire, because it was clear to us that that was going to be an important feature for bringing economic development money into the county. Yes. And after about a year of lobbying through Bucks Business First, we were actually able to achieve a local enterprise partnership for the county. And that created this symbiotic relationship, which has lasted ever since, between Bucks Business First and the local enterprise partnership. So we talk about BBF working at the level of the firm. So it's a business to business venture, whereas the LEP has been very much focused on infrastructure, bringing government grant and funds into the county for major transport projects, mostly because infrastructure is a key ingredient to economic development.
Yes, exactly. So what would you say has been your biggest achievement at Bucks Business First since you started?
We've achieved an awful lot, and I would certainly guide people towards the website to find out a bit more about Buckinghamshire Business First. But it's been the way that we've been able to bring people together.
Yes.
So, we've got over 11,000 members now that represent about 70% of all employment in the county, which is a staggering statistic. And there isn't really another Bucks Business First anywhere in the country where the business community has come together to start lots of important conversations about how business works. We're running all sorts of workshops, member-to-member offers. We have an MD Engage Business Leaders program now, which is helping to train, a generation of business leaders that are coming through. We have, an established business awards program now, highlighting excellence in lots of different areas. But it's all been about communication and relationship building and growing what was already a very successful business community further by, as I say, enabling lots of conversations. And I know there's a theme around this podcast, relationships in business, and how people engage with each other.
Exactly.
And I think what Bucks Business First has been very, very good at doing is giving people that platform to have that engagement and build those strong relationships.
Which is absolutely amazing. So well done for that, Michael. Is fantastic. Well, I was, of course, also involved in the organisation before I was on the board as well. Before, sadly, I moved to Hertfordshire, which disqualified me. And there's not very much I can do about that, but I can certainly testify that it is a really fantastic organisation.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly encourage businesses who are outside of the county to become affiliate members.
Yes.
But it is very much focused on Buckinghamshire. And you're quite right, Jane, to be a member, you need to have a business registered in the county.
Yes, yes, exactly. So what's your biggest hope, Michael, for businesses in Buckinghamshire going forward?
So we've got a bit of a challenge for businesses in Buckinghamshire at the moment. So we are one of the most highly productive business communities in the country. In terms of local enterprise partnership areas, we're fourth in the country out of 38. So we're behind London, sort of Berkshire, and the sort of the M3 South Coast area. And we were third until recently. So whilst we've got very high levels of productivity, we are starting to see that slip a little bit. And so a lot of the focus for the local enterprise partnership, which is actually today launching its industrial strategy at Cranfield University, as part of the 4 local enterprise partnerships that make up the Oxford to Cambridge arc, which is leading the way in, as I say, developing its industrial strategy. And so working jointly with the local enterprise partnership, one of the big key themes for Bucks Business First going forwards is to try to understand, whilst in relative terms, our productivity levels are falling. And so we've seen the output per hour of our business community doing less well in recent years, and we're working hard to understand that, because I'm a great exponent of smart working, for example. So within my business, I always say to my team, don't work harder, work smarter.
Yes.
And that's about productivity. There's no point slaving away at a project hour after hour and not really getting very well or getting very far with it. It's about using technology, it's about using systems. And so what we're doing jointly, as I say, with the local enterprise partnership is to try to really dig deep and understand, although we've got very high levels of productivity, why are they in relative terms slipping? And that is a big concern.
Have you arrived at any conclusions in that respect, Michael?
We haven't yet. There's a lot of work going on. So we've got a skills board that's working very closely with employers, with the school community, with the colleges. And we're really trying to dig deep into the workforce and the business community within the county, just to really get under the skin of why this is. Now, we've got, as I say, an industrial strategy, and actually Buckinghamshire's got some fantastic sectors, and we're building an industrial strategy around those clusters of technology. And so we've got a very strong creative industries sector, based around Pinewood Studios in the south of the county. We've got a very strong high-performance engineering cluster based around Silverstone in the north of the county, and a very strongly emerging space industry sector that's emerging around the Westcott Venture Park, just near Aylesbury. And that's one of our 3 enterprise zones where, through offering businesses a reduction in their business rates payments, we're able to encourage people to come into the county. And what we're seeing now is this cluster around the space industry, in particular propulsion mechanisms, and there's significant investment that we're expecting in that sector. So we're looking to invest our energy into these high performance, high value, high yielding sectors.
Yes.
Which, if you build clusters around those, and part of a super cluster that comes across that Oxford, Cambridge arc area, we think investing in those smart businesses where there's very high value will start to drive productivity levels back up.
Yes. Fantastic. Well, that's so interesting. Moving on to your role at Chandler Garvey, which is also really interesting. So you handle all the biggest commercial property transactions in this area, or at least many of them. So can you give our listeners an example of a couple of projects that you've transacted or are in the process of transacting recently?
Yes, absolutely. So the industrial sector is very strong at the moment. I've been working in the region for 30 years, and this is the first time that the industrial sector has probably been the strongest of the 3 principal commercial property sectors, the other 2 being offices and retail.
Yes.
We know the challenges faced in the retail sector.
Yeah.
And certainly there's been some big structural changes within the office sector in the last 10 years in the post-recession emerging economy.
Yes.
But it's interesting to see how strong the industrial sector is. So we've got a couple of big projects in the county at the moment, working with a particular developer called Chancery Gate, who is one of the big national developers.
Yes.
And so we've got about 100,000 square feet of new warehouse space coming out of the ground in High Wycombe at the moment, and a similar amount of space planned in Chesham. And what we're seeing is a lot of displacement from the West London market.
Yes.
As prices keep rising in those locations, as land is lost to residential development,
Yes.
occupiers are being pushed further west. And actually Buckinghamshire provides those occupiers with a fantastic opportunity, relative affordability, relatively good connectivity to London, the national motorway network, as well as a very engaging business community. And it kind of segues back into Buckinghamshire Business First, a very supportive business community, and a great quality of life. And I think we're in a world where hard work and enjoying yourself go hand in hand. I recently saw a quote which was, work hard, play hard, be kind. And I think actually that picks up really on 3 very important themes in business now, which is, we all have to work hard, and we all do work hard, and you have to work hard to be successful. But increasingly people want that work-life balance. They want to see return on their hard work, and that might be in sporting activity, leisure activity, balancing family with hard work, but also kindness in terms of corporate social responsibility is a really important theme at the moment.
Yes.
So actually Chandler Garvey is sponsoring one of the Buckinghamshire Business Awards that Bucks Business First have annually, and we're sponsoring the Corporate Social Responsibility Award.
Fantastic.
And that's looking at businesses who are going above and beyond in the county, who are really leading by example, by giving back to community, by being environmentally friendly, by being socially aware.
That's absolutely amazing.
And that's a really key feature for the business community, because we know we're in a world of full employment.
Yes.
And actually the ability to attract good talent and retain good talent comes in a number of ways. It's obviously in terms of the salary you pay, the quality of the environment that you provide them to work in, but also are you a company that's got a good social conscience? Young people these days don't want to work for anybody, and certainly not for somebody that doesn't care about community and the environment.
Absolutely.
And so, we're seeing the rising importance of good social corporate responsibility. And that's somewhere where Buckinghamshire is leading the way, actually. I think there are more charities based in Buckinghamshire than any other county. And I think per head of population, I think the county is the most generous in terms of giving to charity. And a lot of that is led by the business community.
Yeah, which is really, really great.
Yeah.
I mean, Michael, you deal with a lot of developers as well as high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals who are investing in property in the region. So how do you see them reacting to Brexit uncertainty and current market trends? And is there a difference in their thinking and behaviour compared to a few years ago?
That's a really interesting question. And actually, since the referendum vote, our business has been flying, which perhaps seems counterintuitive. We've seen 20% per annum growth year on year over the last 3 or 4 years. Our involvement with bigger projects is increasing, and the investment coming into the county doesn't seem to have been affected. The number of deals we're doing is maintained very, very high levels. And so we haven't really seen the impact of Brexit that one might have expected. It has come more recently in the last few months, though. I think as we thought we were getting closer to leaving and making a decision, people were starting to sit on their hands a little bit. I think when a decision was 2 years away, the business community, investors, developers just weren't going to sit on their hands because it was just too far out for them to sort of pause their business.
Yes.
I think as the date drew nearer and people were having to make important investment decisions, they were perhaps taking the opportunity to pause a little bit. But in general terms, we haven't actually seen reduced developer and investor activity. And so Buckinghamshire has got a very, very strong residential market. We've seen significant amounts of residential development in the county over the last 2 years, and that is ongoing.
Yeah.
A lot of land is being released through the local plan process at the moment. You've had 4 districts all producing their plans at very similar times, and obviously in the county at the moment we're moving towards a unitary authority. It's likely that over the short term the district plans will be the development documents that developers will be looking at.
Yes.
And in Wickham, for example, we're expecting now the local plan to be adopted within the next month or two, and that starts to give certainty to developers. There's some very big sites being released. So in Wickham district, for example, there were 5 long-term strategic reserve sites that were being held back. All five of those has been released in the latest phase of the local plan, which demonstrates that insatiable demand amongst the development community for housing development. But also what we've seen very strong investment in the commercial development sector. I've mentioned the strength of the industrial sector. And this is where most of the activity has been. So some big schemes in High Wycombe, in Chesham, but also in Aylesbury. And there are some big sites coming through. You've got the 3 enterprise zones in the county. And so up at Silverstone MEPC have completed a first phase of 125,000 square feet, which is now all fully let. They're going to start a second phase of another 125,000 square feet. You've got Rock Spring, Patrizia on the Westcott Venture Park committing to a new wave of development. And around Arla, at the foot of the A41, the Woodlands Arla Enterprise Zone has got 1 million square feet of commercial floor space proposed over the next several years. So there's lots of very exciting development projects ongoing. There doesn't seem to be a lower appetite among investors for investing in the county. And I think they recognise the depth and the strength of the business community. All of the development factors are right. So proximity to London, the road network. And of course, with the Oxford-Cambridge arc coming through over the next 10 or more years with the expressway, the East-West Rail project linking Oxford to Cambridge, ultimately the first phase of that links Oxford to Bedford. Better rail connectivity, some new road infrastructure, lots of exciting things happening in and around the county. So I'm actually very confident about the future from a local perspective, irrespective of the macro uncertainty that surrounds Brexit.
Yes, yes. And of course, where there's economic redevelopment and regeneration and where there's new commercial units being built, there's also going to be the demand for housing. So,
Yes.
of course, that means that the residential demand is going to stay very, very strong for developers as well, doesn't it?
Yes, it is. And it is a tension within the county because either through permitted development rights that's seen over the last several years a lot of office buildings being converted to residential, or through the planning process that's seen a lot of brownfield sites going to residential. And of course, the releases of some greenbelt and AONB land, there is a huge tension in the county between the need to preserve commercial floor space and the insatiable demand for housing. And it's quite a difficult balance to get right. I've always taken a sort of laissez-faire approach to economics, which is the market determines these things. I think, clearly government can intervene at either a national or a local level, but just by, for example, drawing a red line around a site on the edge of a town and labelling it business park, it doesn't mean that the business park will be built, because you've got to rely upon the private sector to actually want to build it, to want to invest. And obviously what we're not seeing a lot of at the moment is public sector investment in commercial floor space, although there is a little bit going on. So in High Wycombe, for example, Wycombe District Council have invested a significant amount of money in effectively a container village called Desbox that we're involved with as the letting agents and the managing agents. This is a scheme of 30 or 40 reprovisioned shipping containers that have been converted to business units and effectively stacked into a community.
Wow.
And we've seen a fantastic demand. So we're 80% let before the scheme is complete, which again is aimed at the small business sector, people who have had a business from home, their garage. And what this is creating is that small business community environment that the private sector just doesn't cater for.
Yes.
So there has been a small amount of public sector intervention, but the big investment generally comes from the private sector. And as I say, we've seen a lot of that in the industrial sector recently.
Yes.
Very, very little in the office sector. And clearly retail, as I've mentioned before, has got major structural changes going on. But you're right, that tension does arise between housing and commercial floor space. Developers develop to make money, ultimately investors invest to create a return.
Yes.
And they will go where the best returns are. Clearly, over recent years, the best returns have been from housing. But we are starting to see some subtle changes now. I know certainly a number of developers that are pausing on the next phase of their development, be that a town centre apartment scheme or a out-of-town executive home scheme. Certainly there is a little bit of a concern that the housing market is just cooling a little bit, that actually there is too much supply coming through. We know that the major volume house builders like to very closely protect the way that they release housing. And of course, the government are always encouraging people to release more housing more quickly. But obviously from an individual developer's point of view, it doesn't want to saturate either the local market or the regional market. So they closely monitor how they release these things. But actually, I'm hearing stories of those developers now pausing, taking people off site because, the first phase hasn't gone as well as they had hoped it might. And therefore, there is a little bit of concern in that sector.
That's very interesting. Why do you think they are pausing, in your view?
Well, I think it's simple supply and demand economics.
Yeah.
I just don't think there is the demand at the moment, or it might be that householders are pausing, like some businesses are pausing because of Brexit, the uncertainty. There is a lot going on in the national political scene at the moment in terms of the macro economy.
Yeah.
And maybe that is just causing people to pause a little bit. I mean, I know that certainly the top end of the market, the £1 million pound plus houses, that's been quite a slow moving market. But you're starting to see that now in the apartment sector. Again, High Wycombe is a good example where, until a few years ago, there wasn't really a lot of modern apartment development going on within the town centre. But actually
Yes.
now with 2 or 3 schemes, there are perhaps 750 new apartments coming through over the
Yes.
next year or two. And certainly
Yeah.
one of the bigger developments that we have an involvement with, where we're the agents on the commercial element of that within the town centre,
Yeah.
you know, they are delaying starting the second phase because the first phase, the volume of sales hasn't been as good as they were hoping. And so, as I say, people are just pausing a little bit where they've got a development which is phased and they can afford to just hold back the next phase. I think we're starting to see that now. Whether that's a short-term problem or a longer-term problem, there are smarter people than me that could tell you the answer to that. It is nevertheless a current issue, and there is a growing availability of housing, which is counterintuitive in some respects because we talk about the national housing crisis. But actually, certainly in Buckinghamshire, there has been an awful lot of development. And I think some of the developers are just now pausing to see how that significant additional supply beds into current demand patterns.
I mean, a lot of it is also to do with affordability, isn't it? And
It's a huge problem in Buckinghamshire.
And the lending landscape, because
Yeah.
it's obviously been very, very restrictive. And so it's not that the demand isn't there, but it's actually that buyers are struggling to raise their finance to go ahead.
It's a huge problem. And actually,
Yeah.
the county does have a sort of demographics issue. We have a lot of young people, we have a lot of old people, but in people in their 20s and 30s, we've got sort of below the national average. So, Buckinghamshire's got a fabulous education system, a grammar school system still, and, sending a lot of young people to sort of Russell Group universities. But what we're finding is they're just not coming back. And in part, that must be because of affordability. We're still as a nation of homeowners. It's interesting, I've got a 22-year-old son. And we talk about, buying a house, affordability. And I say to him, well, you might be part of the first generation where owning a house just isn't what you want to do. Because I know a lot of people have scrimped and saved over a number of years to try and buy a property, and you see prices rising all the time. The boat gets a little bit further away from shore.
Yes.
And actually a lot of European countries where home ownership just isn't the be all and end all. I think a lot of younger people now will have to accept, either through choice or through the fact that they just can't afford it, that actually renting is going to be the way forward. And obviously we've seen the rise of the private rental sector, PRS. You've seen some of the big institutions starting to invest in those schemes nationally. And I think there is this growing recognition that home ownership will not be what it once was. I mean, even now statistically, home ownership relative to renting, the proportions are changing quite significantly and quite quickly. And so, but affordability is a big issue. And actually affordability of rental property is a big issue as well.
Yes,
because
is.
Even if you give up the hope of buying a property because you just can't raise the capital required, actually rents within the county are very high as well. And that's perhaps the next ticking, housing time bomb, which is the affordability in the rental market.
Well, yes, exactly. Because as you pointed out, at the end of the day, it's all about what the market will dictate. And if they can't afford the rents, just like they can't afford the mortgages, then the rents will have to come down.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to what I said earlier, the sort of laissez-faire approach to economics. The market will work itself out.
Exactly.
I think, I've been critical of, a lot of different types of government intervention into the property sector over the years. I always wish they would talk to the people within the industry more than they apparently do, because, they might better appreciate some of the unintended consequences. Because the problem, like any ecosystem, you meddle with one part of it and you unbalance another part of it.
Yes.
But getting we know the housing crisis, as it's termed, is a very significant issue for the UK economy.
Yes.
The problem is now you've got a significant proportion of the population who are so heavily invested in home ownership, you can't afford to rock the boat one way and create a situation where values fall to make it more affordable for another group of people.
Yes.
And so you've got this finely balanced ecosystem now, which is quite difficult to intervene from the public sector point of view, a governmental intervention point of view. But of course, we've seen over the years how the market tends to deal with its own imbalances, that supply, demand, price equation. You get too much of it, you have too little demand, the price will fall naturally. And that's true of any ecosystem, any economic model.
Yes.
And I don't think the housing market is any different. So yeah, I am a little bit nervous about the housing sector, much more than I am about the commercial sector, actually, because the danger is that with a lot of additional supply, with perhaps fragile demand, the natural consequence might be a price correction, albeit that I think if that were to happen, I don't think it's going to be significant because of the growing population, the growing need for housing, which is kind of fueling the demand side. We've got 500,000 people being added to the UK population per annum. And so in some respects, you've got this self-perpetuating demand profile, even if everything else is constant.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing those insights, Michael. So just moving on back to the people stuff. So I wanted to ask you, how important is trust and integrity to you?
Oh, huge. It's absolutely fundamental. And I think underpins most, if not all, business activity. And certainly in a county like Buckinghamshire, which has got a small business, I employ 15 people. And that makes me one of the top 15% of employers, which is crazy. You've got a micro business community which is founded upon relationships. I think good relationships build trust, and it's a bit of a virtuous circle. I do a lot of networking. Buckinghamshire Business First is a business to business. It's not a networking organisation, but there's a lot of networking that goes on within it. Business leaders dinners, member to member workshops, various, the awards provides a fantastic opportunity to network with people. And I have a number of sayings, one of which is, you only talk to the people you're talking to, which means that, you've got to meet people, you've got to build trust, you've got to talk to them face to face. And when you have face to face discussions, opportunities arise.
Yes.
We're in a world where it's actually quite easy now to just sit at your desk and use LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever platform you're using to communicate with the world. But I worry who's reading all of this stuff. I mean, we are part of that. We've got a very sophisticated marketing machine. We do an awful lot of work on LinkedIn, but it's just part of a bigger picture. We still network very heavily with face-to-face opportunities because those relationships build trust. The reality is, people employ people, I think.
True.
So I specialize in commercial property. I offer advice to owners and occupiers, be it a sale, a letting, or an acquisition for a business or an investor. It's people that employ people, because if you've got the right sorts of credentials, it's a given that you'll be good at what you do. But then it's about who you are. It's your integrity.
Yes.
The way that you can communicate effectively with other business people.
Absolutely.
And I think building those personal relationships is absolutely fundamental, and probably more so in the world we live in now, where you've got lots of different platforms to engage with the world. I think, there's a saying, with every action, there's a reaction.
Yes.
And I think the reaction we might see to all of these different platforms when you can superficially communicate with the world might actually be, more face-to-face contact, because that really builds trust. And actually, it's always great, I think, to look in the whites of the eyes of somebody who you think, you might want to do business with in the future. But also, it's about the referral network as well, because even if you haven't got the need for the service that business can provide, you might know somebody that does. And if you've actually met and built a relationship with somebody, you'll feel confident in recommending them, even though you haven't used them yourself.
Absolutely.
And so the power of networking, but good networking, not just networking for the sake of it. And I think if you are going to engage in networking, it has to be thoughtful, it has to be done with purpose.
Yes.
Because just turning up at a meeting somewhere, holding a glass of wine, stood in the corner, speaking to the same old people, it's like throwing a stone into a very small pond. It only ripples so far, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
You've got to throw it into a bigger pond and get those circles moving out in a much wider circle.
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, property has always been a massive people business as well,
Oh,
hasn't it?
huge.
So,
And
yes.
actually, we a lot of the investment deals, a lot of the development deals we do are off market
Yeah.
in the gray, what I call the grey market. So I might speak to a client who says to me, we're thinking of selling this land, we're thinking about selling this investment. So I'm currently selling a £5 million office investment in the county. And the marketing strategy initially is to go to no more than 10 or 12 people who
Yes.
I know and trust. I know they've got the money. I trust they'll perform if they say they're interested. Is to
Yes.
quietly go to people, give them the opportunity off market. It makes them feel that, this is a special opportunity. And that's people that I've built relationships with over 30 years. It's people that I trust. And therefore, building those relationships is good for business. You want to build strong, long-lasting relationships based upon integrity and performance. But a lot of certainly a lot of the bigger deals we do are done off market.
Yes.
with people who we know, trust, and that will perform. And therefore, anybody working in that sector, building those good, trusting relationships is absolutely essential, because without that network, you are limiting your opportunities.
Definitely, definitely. So what would be the best way for somebody to develop relationships, say, with a commercial agent like you? Because, clearly there would be a lot of developers that might be listening in, a lot of investors, and they think, well, actually, you know what, I would love to be the person that is on his list.
Yeah.
So how would you start to develop a relationship with somebody like you?
Yeah, it has to start slowly. I mean, I get calls, emails, LinkedIn requests all day long from people asking to meet me.
Yeah.
And I have to be selective. I just can't meet with everybody. And what we tend to do is build, a fairly sort of limited circle of these sorts of contacts. There's no point in having, 5,000 superficial contacts. I'd rather have, 200 really tight, good, strong ones.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think you've actually got to bring something to the party. It's a two-way street.
Yep.
So actually, if you can bring intelligence to me, if you can bring knowledge, if you can demonstrate that you're actually investing, that you are performing, that you're people with integrity, that you do what you say, it's a bit like an interview in some respects.
Yes.
If I'm introducing an opportunity to you where I'm acting for somebody else, I don't want a time waster. Or if I've got a little bit of early information on a site or an investment coming to the market, and I need to try and place that, try and earn a fee from that introduction, I'm going to want to do it with somebody who's got a good track record, who's got integrity, who will do what they say, because there are a lot of people in our industry that frankly don't do what they say.
Absolutely.
And turn out to be time wasters. And I just can't afford to align my business with people like that, because it then reflects poorly upon me and my business.
Absolutely.
So it's about what you bring. If you want to build a relationship with me where I'll share valuable information with you, it's, well, what can you bring to me? And that might be market intelligence, it might be opportunities, but at the very least it has to be integrity. And of course, I don't expect you to buy everything I put to you, but actually, if you show interest, you've got to perform, you've got to be genuine, and you've got to be credible, and you've got to have the funds. And having the funds is really important.
Yes.
And so when I'm selling a site for a client, for example, and we're looking at offers that come through, a really, really important feature is ability to perform.
Yes.
You've got to demonstrate credibility, that you've actually got the money, that if we give you the contract, you can actually perform. We see a lot of people who try to work a position, they get a position, and then they go and try to find the funds. That's not the way to do business in the world I work. Come forward and say, right, this is our track record. This is the work that we do. Here's proof that we've got the funds in place, because that breeds confidence and it develops, integrity and credibility.
Absolutely. I mean, in a way, it's like buying any property. If you were buying a house, and you hadn't sold your house, didn't have the money in the bank, then you wouldn't be taken as seriously as if you had, here you are, here's the money in the bank, so we've just sold our property and here's the mortgage offer and this is how much we can afford. And, it's a similar thing, isn't it, really? Just
absolutely.
on a bigger scale.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think sort of more so than the residential sector, because you tend to have sort of, B2C relationships, whereas in the commercial sector, it's more sort of B2B.
Yeah.
It is about the integrity of the individuals that run those organizations, because it goes back to people do business with people.
Yep.
And therefore, a good track record, some good references, showing that the monies, the funds are available. They're really important ingredients.
Yes, absolutely. So I've just got one more question to you, which is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
What advice would I give to my younger self? Probably to have invested more directly in property, although that is a tension. I think good advisors don't make good principals, unfortunately, because I see the risk in everything. So people pay me to critique opportunities, to not only, of course, point out the good things, but also point out the bad things. So whilst I think I'm a very good advisor, I'm not sure I'd be a great principal, because perhaps I'd be too risk adverse. So perhaps the advice might be to be less risk adverse and take some more chances. But again, I don't think I could have gone on to be an advisor, because it's very difficult to be an advisor and a principal in a market, because of course other principals that you'd be working with would be worried that you would be taking all the best opportunities for yourself.
I understand.
But no, I think being a bit less risk adverse can be helpful as a developer or an investor. But what you do need is good advisors around you who will point out actually what the risks are.
Yes.
And any decision you make must be well informed. And that's why, anybody looking to invest in Buckinghamshire, you've got to take advice from people who know the county, who know the subtlety of the demand, the supply patterns, know about infrastructure projects that might be coming through that could amplify the investment later on.
Absolutely. Well, Michael, I just wanted to say thank you for an absolutely amazing interview. I know that our listeners will love hearing from you. It's been really great to have you on here, and thank you so much for your time.
Jane, it's been an absolute pleasure, and hopefully I've said a few things that somebody or some people might find interesting.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Connector podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not head over to janebayler.com and order a copy of my free report on building your personal brand. I'd love to connect with you on social media. And finally, don't forget to like and subscribe to my podcast so that you never miss a show. Thanks for listening in, and see you soon.